If you're a high-achieving woman who's exhausted by stress, stuck in constant conflict, and tired of being overlooked in the exact rooms where you know you were born to lead, then this podcast is for you. So here's your host, Pallavi Jain.
Welcome to her Boss Brain podcast. I'm Pallavi, and today's conversation is about something I think many organizations are wrestling with right now. How do we create performance without creating exhaustion? We talk a lot about strategy, execution, productivity, and growth. But underneath all of that are human beings who are expected to perform in uncertainty, constant change, and increasingly, complex work environments. Joining me today for this conversation is Juliet Dupre. Juliette is the Chief People Officer and Interim COO at Other Side Entertainment and an organizational strategist who works at the intersection of people, performance, and the future of work, and have been recently awarded with 3 HR Leadership Awards for innovation and leadership impact. Over the past 15 years, she has helped technology companies scale through growth and transformation by building high performing teams, leading organizational change, and rethinking how people practices drive business outcomes. Juliet, I'm excited for this conversation and to explore what it truly takes to build cultures where both people and businesses can thrive. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to speak about this topic with you today. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. And before we talk strategy and leadership, I want to touch on your personal journey, which is rooted in resilience, adaptability, and navigating change from an early age. So, would you be open to sharing a personal moment or that experience with us that has shaped how you lead today?
Sure. Yeah, I didn't expect for you to get too into that, but I'm happy to. And I do, I'm not, I've ever hidden that or kept that under wraps. It's a little bit about that on my LinkedIn profile. So happy to share. For anyone who is not as familiar with my background, I trained professionally in ballet when I was young and also sort of grew up in a less financially successful home, I guess you could call it. So I ended up financially independent by the age of 14. I was truly my own by that age, managing my own financial life, my own life in general, everything from going to the dentist to, paying bills and having a bank account.
Oh,
And there were a lot of reasons for that related to my home situation. And it was a little bit scary, but I learned so much at a young age about resilience. I really wanted to believe that I could achieve a future that would be safe and well and financially stable for myself.
yes.
And I think I did those things and I'm very proud of that. But even just as a young person, there are many barriers that I ran into, many roadblocks, many confusing things. I did not have a ton of support and help from adults. I did have some unexpected sort of like angels come in the picture to help me figure things out. Wonderful people that I still consider um, family to me today, but no shortage of pretty significant, unusual challenges that I just learned sort of think about. I don't know if there's any Star Trek fans out there. You run
Yeah.
into a problem and it seems like you have 5 or 6 things and they're unsolvable. And you just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other and solving the thing that's in front of you.
Yes.
And that's how you keep going. Just don't give up. Keep striving to solve the thing that's right there and focus on that. Don't think about what if it doesn't happen. Don't think about, well, if I have that solved, then I have 4 other things to solve. Just one at a time, knocking them down. And that's really stayed with me through the course of my life and certainly my professional life, going through, recessions and various crazy things. I'm in a tech startup universe. There's no
Yep.
shortage of challenges. So that's my personality sort of baked into who I am. It's become very
Mhm.
useful. And I try as best as I can to educate and inspire resilience in others as well and talk about, because I think where I came from gives me a lot of perspective and resilience that many people mm, thankfully had not as much
Yeah.
challenge growing up perhaps and don't, haven't been exposed to that. And that's a good thing. But if I have
Yes.
that, it's something I try to share.
No, wow. Oh my God. Like financial independence at the age of 14, that's huge. And I can't even imagine what you had to go through to do that. But like you said, I mean, those challenges are shaping how you're showing up. So give us one example. Like, how does that show up in your decisions today? If you can think of one
Yeah.
example that you can share.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is, of course, the attitude that you take when something doesn't work out, the perspective that you have when situation isn't what you want it to be. I have at least some confidence to know that I've been through harder things and that hard things can happen. There is a future day. There's, more to come if you're fortunate, have your health. There's a lot there.
Yeah.
It's easy in business to just get really caught up in things that from a big picture perspective aren't the end of the world, even though they may be very, very serious and very challenging. It's important to remember that, especially if you've been through very tough things, that you can get through them, you can survive. There is still a lot of good in what you're doing, what you're pursuing, what you've built for yourself, as far as you've come, to just not give up. And that, I've been with companies who've been through very serious financial hardships or downturns, always in the live
Yes.
events business when COVID hit. So live events fell
Wow.
apart. Our business was, say the least heavily impacted, basically kind of destroyed. So,
Exactly.
these things are very serious. They affect people's livelihoods, their health insurance coverage, all these things. And also tomorrow is a new day. And that's the kind of attitude and approach that I think I learned early in life that is extremely helpful in the crazy times we're living in, which is an overused phrase, no less
And I think that
applicable.
makes sense. It kind of, I think, builds that mindset that how you're
Mhm.
approaching certain thing and with that great, but at the same time, with that hope that things will get better because you've gone through those kind of rhythms so many times. So that makes sense. So if we now move to your role as both the CPO and the interim COO, it's interesting because, as an HR leader, so I have been the CPO and the HR leader of various organizations and also collaborated with other COOs and CEOs. So you sit now at that intersection of people and business performance because I think that's how I would see both roles in my experience.
Yes.
What are some of the biggest people and culture challenges you're navigating right now?
Sure. I think it is really does come back to resilience. Sort of a related point to what we just spoke about is that the pace of change has accelerated, which is really a dramatic shift in the past 20, 30, 40 years. Change transformation used to be something that, business writers for HBR, there's plenty of books out there, would
Yes.
really characterize as a one-time experience. There's a new big technology. There is a thing happening over here. We're pivoting the business, particularly in the tech startup field, if you're in there, but really
Yep.
across all fields with the advent of our political and economic climate, AI as a major disruption.
Yep.
It's just constant. It is
Yeah.
not a one-time, oh, let's run a transformational change. Here's our checklist. Here's the steps we're going to take to move these thousands of people forward, or even tens of thousands in some cases. It is a daily experience to have
Yes.
to, pull from one's resilience and manage the emotional impact, change fatigue that people experience. This is no longer, and probably will not revert to,
Yeah.
a world in which business operates with periods of long stability and
Absolutely.
then occasional disruptions that people get their feathers ruffled over. It is just non-stop. Who knows what the next email is going to bring? Who knows what the next announcement is going to bring? Who knows what the next news headline is going to be that's going to affect my life day to day? Kind of a
That makes perfect sense. And I see that a lot with the organizations I work with because, our own program is built on that change and resilience of making people capable to do that.
yeah.
You understand that. But from your vantage point, like, what are leaders underestimating in all of this?
Yeah, it's a psychological impact for sure, the mental health impact. We just had May was Mental Health Awareness Month for anyone
Yes.
who is maybe not keeping track of the many different months of awareness of things, which is understandable. There's all kinds of stuff going on all the time.
Yes.
It is a very real impact to our economy, right? If you
Yes.
have an entire group or generation or multiple generations of folks dealing with constant resilience limitations and change fatigue and mental health impacts from the feelings of uncertainty, living in a VUCA world, a body world, whichever
Yes.
acronym you prefer, it all really comes down to the same thing. It's
Yeah.
exhausting mentally. You talk about exhaustion in some of your work. It's really a mental hardship for a lot of
Yeah.
folks. And if you take that and sort of extrapolate it to, it's funny how executives and businesses and folks trying to focus on profitable outcomes are very quick to find any little way they can to improve productivity
Yeah.
and assumedly ROI, assumedly profit. When something like this is a huge impact to our workforce and therefore to our profitability across the board as an economy. And it's just very hard to get focus and attention and resources for mental health, for,
Yeah.
taking care of people as humans so that they can actually thrive and be their best and be their most productive and engaged. It's
Yeah.
wild to me.
No, you're absolutely true. And, kind of, it's like we talk a lot about strategy and execution and about performance, but pressure seems to be this invisible force that is sitting underneath all of it. And like I said, one thing I've observed in my work is that the most organizations they invest heavily in these technical capability, leadership skills, and
Yep.
operational excellence. But performance is really lost in these documents and strategies. It's literally lost in these real moments when everyday
Oh,
pressure
yes.
rises, when emotions escalate, when priorities collide, and people are unable to make good decisions, right? So do you think organizations are intentionally building that human capability today, or are we assuming that people will figure it out on their own because they're smart, so they'll figure out that? And if that capability gap exists, if you think it exists, what does it cost us, like in performance, culture, retention, and business outcomes? Kind of what you were saying.
Yeah. I think there's probably research out there on this, but if I were a betting woman, I would bet that it does cost us billions of dollars in revenue for across the US. Like, I think that's actually an easy statement for me to make.
Yes.
And there are lots of ways that companies attempt to quantify this that are very legitimate, like days missed,
Mhm.
unexpected time off. There are all these metrics and KPIs that we use. But what can't be really accurately captured, I think, or is very difficult to capture in numbers is just the day-to-day kind of like you're speaking
Yes.
about, the day-to-day lack of velocity, lack of engagement that doesn't really get, doesn't get manifested in necessarily days specifically. It gets manifested in interactions kind of spiral instead of going somewhere, or departments speaking to each other, people not, really just thriving and being in a flow state. There's a lot to be said about that. I think if you study professional athletes, if you study how the
Yep.
brain works when it's in an optimal state, there's a reason why that is such a big industry, right? Trying to sort of get oneself to the promised land of brain activity and comfort. We know that there is a huge difference in our own performance and how people perform when they're in that optimal state. It's not really possible to achieve that state when you feel like you're in a constant state of being,
Yes.
because safety, psychological safety, trust, and all those things that would, the squishy things a lot of CEOs think are stupid is prerequisite to having that flow state, which is critical to having optimized productivity. So I don't know what, for those out there who are skeptical, I know what to tell you. This is how the human brain operates. And you, as someone who studies neuroscience and adaptability and how the brain operates in stress situations versus flow state situations, which are kind of, to me, the opposite ends of the business brain perspective, it's quite obvious. But I think there are a lot of people out there who are very skeptical of that and will absolutely waste money on new technologies and things like that are just not a total waste of time, but just, to me, a lot more spurious in their outputs, actually, than investing in people's wellness, their mental health, and making sure that folks can have a chance at achieving that level of performance that is really desirable and really the sweet spot that we all want our businesses to operate in all the time.
Yeah. And what you said makes so much sense because, it's like you said, right? They're busy spending all this money on all this technology. It's like, you're getting all this decked up car with all the bells and whistles and everything, and the person don't even know how to drive. What's the point
Yeah.
of all those features? And I think in technology too, we end up like, even when I was an HR leader, right? We would take a system, we'll spend so much thousands of dollars on that, then we'll train people, and then people don't even end up using 10% or 20% of the features of that software. It's really that, right? And I also really try to make a point that it's not just well-being or mental health that we're talking about here. It's truly, preparing them and teaching them how to operate under this pressure and change, because we have never been taught. We just assume that, if a person is smart and competent, they will just take care of that, or they will just know that how to do it. But now, kind of what you said a few minutes ago, that, it's not like change is going to happen once in a lifetime. It's every day. You talked about COVID, you talked about AI, all the other things that are happening every single day. This is a norm. And we haven't created that capability. Like, you mentioned
No,
athletes,
exactly.
like, they go through that mindset and that kind of training that prepare star athletes to actually perform in those moments where we then, stick glued and we watch and we expect them to deliver because that's what they consistently
Mhm.
keep doing, right? So I agree with you, what you're saying and what you're seeing, because a lot of organizations are seeing that. Some are agreeing to it, some are not. Basically, saying, okay, I choose not to see that, right? But so you have shared something with me that really stayed with me the other day. We were talking, and you shared that in your current organization, you're able to reduce turnover from 20% to 4%. I mean, that's significant. So what changed? Like, were there assumptions that turned out to be wrong? What are some of the strategies you did? Like, how did you do that?
But it's a bunch of little things, I think.
Yes.
But, I've analyzed that and thought about the approach. You never know for sure if your approach is going to be successful. And there are externalities you can't control that also play a role in favor and against what you're trying to do, right?
That's
For
right.
right now, when it comes to turnover, it's important to acknowledge the labor market is very, very cheap. So, job hugging is the cute new phrase people are using. But so, it's always important to acknowledge that. But this was sort of already in that period of time. So I think it's not like a new context that this change happened within. But it was first, of course, talking to people and listening to what their issues were, and trying to really prioritize and look at that as a systemic, this painting a picture,
Yes.
as well as, sort of what I always say is like search and destroy like bugs in software. You want to find these issues that people are experiencing and see how many can I annihilate. Honestly, I think of it that way. It's like, I don't know, I come from video games, so maybe that's my mindset.
Yes.
Like, how can I like find and destroy these little problems that people are having? I think that makes a big difference when you're listening, when you're
Yes.
understanding how a small frustration impacts someone's experience and can be very meaningful for them and taking it seriously. And then looking at the whole, what is the system that we've created for people to exist in here at the studio, and includes things like the benefits, the, programs we have for them. We did overhaul, with the support of our wonderful CEO, Paul, who I mentioned earlier, established a number of new programs to be more supportive to people. We already had some good stuff going, like here, they had a learning stipend. We had a wellness stipend. We expanded those programs. We also added in a number of other programs. And for a time, we're very fortunate to be able to offer free mental health care about a year and a half for the staff with
That's
licensed
great.
licensed mental health workers. So that was really awesome as well. Even just knowing that it was there gave people comfort.
Yep.
A lot of participation. I think you made an earlier point about logging participation in programs. It is a way to certainly measure how initiatives are going, whether they're being
Right.
used or not is certainly relevant. But it's tough to really quantify, again, like coming back to the issue of what are the KPIs of this? It's tough to really quantify.
Yes.
whether these programs are operating. In my head, I still think of, if you pull back to the community lens, you pull even farther back to the national stage lens of GDP and these other measures.
Yeah.
How productive are we as a society, as a nation, if everyone's operating at a little bit less?
That's a great point.
Because so it's a little bit of a bigger picture mindset that I take to this as well. But yes, going back to this little statistic of turnover, it's relevant. It certainly was very noticeable. We're very proud of that. It was something we specifically wanted to improve. I'm very, very happy with the.
That's amazing. That's really incredible because I think a lot of us stay in those engagement surveys and things, and then the real metrics, people don't look at that. If they look at it, they are not able to make those real pivots happen. So congratulations, because that's really amazing that, you were actually able to achieve sustainable results through those pivots that you made. So yeah. And the other thing that you spoke, which I definitely wanted to share here, because I think that's a great perspective for other HR leaders and CEOs and COOs who are out there, because I feel sometimes there is this conflict. So I'll share with you, some of the programs that I've done for the organizations, the CPO really wanted to bring that program to their organization and were very invested. But then oftentimes either the CFO or the COO were more about the short term. Okay, why? And I think it's the wiring that they've been doing these same stuff for 20 years and they are not pausing to understand, well, that's not working. You're already spending so much time and resources into that. It's worth trying something new and see what happens, because that anyways is not working, right? What we're learning in a conflict management training or project management training or something like that, right? Or effective decision making. Are we really applying that in real situations? And how many of us are doing that? So it's not, we got to move past the check the box exercise that we are offering trainings, but actually investing our money and potential into things that actually matter. Kind of, how you did in the turnover experience, right? You actually found out what is really creating this and try to solve that rather than just keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So this
100%.
example that you shared with me really was brilliant when you talked about this Venn diagram. And I think you can see it because you have both sides and you're doing the people aspect, and then you're very mindful and conscious of the operational impact and the business outcome. So it probably came naturally to you, but I think it's a great perspective. So would you mind sharing and explaining to our listeners what that Venn diagram that you and I were talking about and how you see that and why both pieces are so important?
Of course. So it's something that I've had in my brain, sort of in my head as a mental model for a long time. And it's just this concept that, of course, we recognize there is a friction between labor and people, fundamentally. This is something that if you've done social science research, even dabbled in it, is undeniable. It's why we had all the labor controversies and union controversies in the, early turn of the century, last century. And as I managed to point out to HR folks coming up under me and my teams, people literally fought and died for the 40-hour work week. That was a really important turning point in history, and it really highlights the friction. Now, with that being said, neither can survive without the other. There is so much mutual goal, mutual objectives that both labor and capital have, because they can't succeed with each other. They can't survive, let alone succeed. And that's really important. That it's really important for the workforce to understand that without the business, they do need the business. There are lots of people out there, all my folks on Reddit, I hear you. And yet also, here is a reality that, not every single person in the US to be an entrepreneur. And I know that's a topic right now. So we need businesses as people who want to work for them. And we need them to be healthy businesses. We need them to be businesses where they can be profitable. That profit is not inherently evil. And so that's one side of it. And then the other side, you have businesses, that the capitalist side. And that's where it's easy to start thinking that all that capital needs and wants and thinks about is fit. And sometimes that does happen. I will never deny that. And yet also capital has to recognize, and often does recognize, that without the humans, without the people, they can't move forward. Now, obviously, people are going to raise their hand and say, "But what about AI? AI is coming for all our jobs." I think there's a lot of disagreement about that, first of all, and a lot
Yes.
of very intelligent people pointing out that is not where we are right now. I can't vouch for tomorrow, maybe tomorrow, but not today. Today, that's not where we are. There are a lot of companies that are saying that AI is the reason they're doing layoffs or whatever, or they're not worried about a workforce. Fine. That is still a very, very small percentage. Go look
Yep.
at the numbers. It's a pretty small percentage of companies. And that's important too. So I'm just talking about the reality of right now and the reality that we've seen for a very, very long time. I'm not saying that can't change, but I don't think it's right in front of us even. I think it's, that type of experience would be far, much farther in the future, in my opinion. And that is something I stand by for this context of this discussion. In that Venn diagram, you have this overlap, the business and the people. We really need good economies, healthy economies, and together is the only way that we can create that. The business needs to have its ability to make profit, or if a nonprofit, ability to make impact in the way that it's
Yep.
expected to. And the humans need to have an environment, a community, a business environment in which they can thrive. You can't deny that any more than you can deny that the friction exists. And so I really try to find that overlap. That is what my goal is every day, is to find that overlap and keep people focused, because I think that's where the most opportunity is, and the most, not just for economies, but for
I love
communities.
that. Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I think that is the right approach. And that's why, I love your depiction of that physical kind of diagram, because sometimes people don't understand that. It's so obvious to some, but it's not
Yeah.
obvious to some, right? And we need leaders like you more and more in the day to day and in the future who actually understand that and who can be very intentional and strategic about making sure that they are operating in that overlap where it's working for both sides. Because, right, what happens when companies optimize only for one side?
Mm-hmm.
The system doesn't work. At the end of the day,
This
kind of
doesn't
what you
work.
said,
Yeah.
right? You need the both. So I really like that. And can you share with us an example, which I'm sure you have many, but if you can share one where you made that decision that strengthened culture, employee performance while also improving business outcomes?
Yeah, I will give you one of the toughest ones because it's happened more than once in my career, which
Okay.
is, people are going to have strong feelings about this one. I understand. It's the removal of performance related talent uh, detractors from the businesses. So folks who are having performance issues, making the tough decision to really identify those, pursue course correction, and then if we're not able to make that course correction, to go ahead and remove those folks from the business. The worst part of the work that we do, the worst. And also incredibly critical to support the people who are there, who are bringing their best work and doing what they can to keep the business moving forward and for the business to continue moving forward. It's just
Mm-hmm.
not possible to not make those tough decisions and for communities to succeed, which
Yes.
is a huge statement to make, but I do stand by it. I know that's far necessarily to hear for some folks, but those have been the moments that have been the toughest, where the rubber meets the road on these kinds of things. Perfect example. And I've spoken with more than one CEO who is troubled by the decision, and others less so. Others are on the opposite of the spectrum, and then you have to kind of balance that out. But on the side of, as well, hiring managers who have trouble making that decision, super, super common. And I always feel it's very important to point out to them and help them to really see the importance of protecting the people that are in their roles properly and
Correct.
doing their best work.
Mm-hmm.
You're really harming them. You are harming them by having them pick up the slack from other people, duly, from having them working with folks who they don't feel great to be sitting next to. Really, really hurts them. And that's not a nice thing that you're doing. So that's a tough example. I give it because it's so difficult, but it happens all the time.
sense. It makes sense. And I think kind of what you said, it's kind of the other side of it. How is it creating
Mhm.
accountability and
Yeah.
on both sides, right? And for the people who are actually doing great work, right? It's these moments also showcase that you're not sending those mixed signals, which I talk a lot
Yeah.
about here also with that misalignment, right? Because sometimes we say people are not taking ownership or not, they're not taking accountability for some things, but that often sometimes also happens because of these conflicting messages that they get from their leadership. Like, what is it that
Absolutely.
actually matters here? So I think,
Absolutely.
right. So I hear you. And I think that is such a good point and definitely harder to do those things, but sometimes you got to do what's the right thing to do. So I know you're also very passionate about, and we've touched on that a little bit, about mental health and human sustainability. And I know how much you were raving about your own current company and your CEO, who is very, very supportive of those efforts and see the value in that. So what does that actually look like in the day-to-day leadership, not just in statements, but in operating decisions?
Yeah. I think, of course, you have to make an effort to understand people's contexts. So
Yes.
related to our question that you just asked and my answer about, removing talent who's not able to keep up, the other side of that coin is really important to do you really understand people's context? Do you really understand what they're dealing with? Things like loss of a family member, things like serious illnesses. It's really important to understand the extent that people are comfortable disclosing. And hopefully you've created an environment where they feel safe doing that. What those things are that they're going through, if they are there, so that you can calibrate and provide a compassionate atmosphere for those issues when it makes sense to do so.
Yeah.
Um, this can get really complicated. So, it does get really complicated. People go, especially as, your workforce grows with you, and hopefully you folks have a tenure where they've gone through different stages in life with you. Things are going to happen. People go through different
Yes.
phases in life, changes, divorces, these various moments. And it's super important. I think it is for us and for my CEO to really understand the context that people are dealing with. Even when performance is great, whatever's going on. It's not
Yes.
it's not only about that. It's about caring about your workforce genuinely. Now we're a very small company. We can have a lot more touch points with people. We can have a bit more sort of the friendly, sort of just everybody knows everybody atmosphere than a
Yes.
10,000 person company. And of course I understand. And also we have a lot less room for slack because we already operate with extremely limited resources. We don't have redundancies built in on everything. It's possible when you're a tiny company to do that. So yes, no matter where you sit in the size of company type of remit, there's pros and there's challenges and there's easy parts to this for you. But I don't think it makes it any less worth working towards understanding what people are dealing with and
Yeah.
having a reasonable amount of support and compassion for them. Reasonable, not unreasonable, reasonable amount of support and compassion.
That's great. That's great. Well, that's good to hear. And as you were talking about, the context of understanding where people were actually coming from, one example just came to my mind and I would love to share it here. So I was working with the group of managers and directors in one of the organization I was working, and they all agreed that communication was a challenge, okay, within their team. And initially everyone thought the issue was these meetings and the processes that we were going through. But once we started looking deeper, what literally emerged was that communication wasn't the root issue. It was often what people brought into those moments under pressure, right?
Mm.
People were entering conversations already overloaded or having personal situations or making assumptions. They were reacting defensively or avoiding difficult conversations, or the leaders were rushing decisions, right? Because they wanted to get it over with. So we worked on helping them recognize those moments in real time. So, kind of what you said, rubber hits the road, right? In those real moments, what's really happening, not in theory, and build those intentional ways of responding. So, I remember one leader shared that instead of escalating a conflict and losing weeks of productivity after that and momentum, they approached the conversation differently and resolved it in one meeting. And that's the beauty of when leadership actually understands and gets the context of why something is happening the way it's happening. and also understand their own emotions and how they are perceiving the certain situation. It's incredible, right? And that's when it struck me that it wasn't that people learned something new. It was just the external conditions didn't change, but the quality of how people showed up for one another, that changed the outcome, right? So,
Yeah.
and when you think about culture and performance in your own organization, do you see this internal capacity as something that can actually be developed, or, is it still largely being treated as personality?
Yeah, I think it varies by organization for sure.
Yes.
And it can be even specific to the group, to the team, to the leadership team at that time. There's so many
Yes.
different things that go into how that is sort of calibrated or and perceived by everyone. But I think something that's really important about what you said, and that's sort of the ground and also the foreground of everything that we've discussed today, is the idea of emotional intelligence and emotional regulation.
Yeah.
And when I did my master's, it was on the topic of the importance of long-term mindset in business leadership, which you had mentioned earlier. Why, the short-termness, myopic mindset. And I'm with you
Yes.
100% on how damaging that is to
Yes.
communities and economies. But I think it's very, very connected to everything having to do with emotional regulation that you just said on a day-to-day level and emotional intelligence. And a lot of the work that I studied, I was at the New School for my master's and worked under Dr. Lapa Poonamali, who I adore. Highly recommend her research if anyone's looking for more on this topic. That was a lot of what it came down to when we're talking about long-term mindset versus short-term mindset, the ability to navigate day-to-day situations even that are, can either spin into businesses' complete inability to coordinate itself, or that can just simply be, part of the day to day. We know how to navigate it. We know how to sort of acknowledge and manage our emotional response to these things and work together to solutions with minimum amount of drama.
Yeah.
It's actually all quite connected.
Yeah, and that's why, we say when we say that, people don't leave organizations, they leave managers because they
Yeah,
are the ones that are having these daily interactions. That's the feeling you
exactly.
get of going to work. How do I feel sitting in that
Mm-hmm,
office or interacting with my team? It's the day to day. And even you mentioned
mm-hmm.
like the turnover thing. It was the what people were feeling in the day to day moments and
Little
what was
things that add
right.
up. Mm-hmm.
It's those little things because they happen repeatedly, and those are things that we experience in our day-to-day life, and they stack up of,
They really do.
creating that experience. So I think that all makes sense. So bringing it back to you, because you have a great role that you play here, and when you think about your own ability to lead under pressure, what practices help you stay, intentional instead of reactive and actually intentionally lead others around you?
Right. So a literal practice that will not surprise you. You've probably run into others before who cited that is meditation. The
Yeah.
practice, and I have a meditation practice. My meditation practice is not perfect like many, but it is there for me. And it's been extremely valuable to me in times of stress, ups and downs through life. And it's just really important to me to have a moment that I take at least once a week where I can give my brain some space and reset time. I think it was really interesting in your ATM framework, which if people aren't familiar with it, is
Yes.
Pallavi's TED Talk, which you should definitely go check out. There's this idea of the, sort of like a mental reset. If you're withdrawing something, you have to put something in. You kind of the way that I
Yes.
interpreted
Yes.
it from you. And for me, that's something that meditation does. It actually puts something back, something positive, something energizing, and simultaneously relaxing and rejuvenating into my brain process. So I do recommend if anyone out there has been curious about meditation, you don't have to buy a fancy app to do it. Dr. Poonamali, who I mentioned, has a website. There's free stuff there. There's free stuff all over the internet. That's very, very good. And at the end of the day, meditation is simply sitting quietly, so it shouldn't cost you anything, right?
No,
I'm kind
absolutely.
of joking, but it's really important to democratize it and help people access it.
It does because it actually creates that pause that we talk about, right?
Mhm.
So I've been meditating for a very long time, and my husband
Oh,
jokes about it. It's been 9 years. And my husband jokes about it. Like, she can miss anything, but she can't miss her meditation practice. I'm like, yes, I can't.
Love it. I love it.
Yes.
Yes. So
So happy, then let me go do that.
tell
Because
you what, it's really something.
yes, it is. And I think it's creating that ritual, whatever grounds you, whatever brings you back to your normal state. Because in our normal states, all of us are amazing human beings. We all want to do good. We all, it's just at the end of the day, everybody wants to feel loved. Everybody wants to feel fulfilled and connected and, all that. And it's a way of coming back to that reality or to that center. So I 100% agree with you. And I have had the same experience that it really grounds you. It really brings you back to what is it that truly matters to you, because it creates that space, right? Because otherwise we're just reacting to life that's happening in front of us, and we're just in that moment. And we get lost because we are in this overstimulated world today where, you open social media and, there's just so many things that just are thrown at you. And that's the whole, like, that's how they're designed, right? That's how it is.
Yes.
But it's important to just step back for a few minutes and definitely ground yourself. So thank you for that quick, sharing of your own thing, that it works for you. And that's something. And what's one capability? This is my last question to you. What's one capability leaders will need more of over the next 5 years than they do today?
Yeah, I think it really does come down to how our conversation started, the ability to help others build their own resilience. It's funny. I was at a conference earlier this week and someone made a comment like, oh, I shouldn't say resilience. It's such an overused word. So I suppose it's becoming a buzzword to people, which is regrettable. Happens. Branding is a whole thing, marketing, any different phrase. But if you can sort of remove the overuse of it and really understand what that word means to someone who has been through, even in your own life, I'm sure a lot of folks out there listening, they've been through a death in the family. They've been through, different crises in life, different, economic collapses, layoffs, really tough things. And building the belief that you will be okay, it does translate to these crazy things we experience at work, in business. It really is a valuable skill to build, and it is a buildable skill. It's not something you're born with or you're not.
Definitely.
And I think leadership has to be a leader. You need to be able to help people find that in themselves. There's nothing buzzwordy about it. It's a very real human need to be able to move forward in the face of serious adversity. I think there will be no shortage of adversity coming up in the next,
Yes,
few decades.
absolutely. No, I love
Can't
that.
imagine a more important saying to use to lead people. And
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. It was such a wonderful conversation. And I want to give you a moment to also tell our listeners what is the best way they can reach you?
Oh, wonderful. So I am on LinkedIn, of course. I'm there, Juliet Dupre. It's like /Juliet Dupre, whatever.
Information
and so
in the
that's
show notes.
easy.
Yeah, we'll have your
Yeah,
information in the show notes.
Perfect. And I'm at Juliet Dupre on Twitter though, or X. So behind the times, but I'm not often there. So I'm not a huge social media person, and that is also reflective of my resilience beliefs and how unhelpful that world is.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much. What stood out to me today is that in a world where uncertainty, pressure, and change aren't going away, our ability to perform isn't just about what we know. It's about how we show up in the moments that matter the most. Because leadership isn't tested in theory, it's tested in conversation, in everyday decisions, setbacks, competing priorities, and the moments where we choose how we respond. So I just want to thank you again, Juliet, for sharing your insights and giving us a deeper look into what it really means to build organizations where people and performance can actually thrive together, and a more intentional way of thinking that both are sides of the same coin. So I just want to thank you again. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And until next time, keep leading from within.
So that's it for today's episode of our Boss Brain podcast. Head on over to Apple Podcasts, iTunes, or wherever you listen and subscribe to the show. One lucky listener every single week that posts a review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes will win a chance in a grand prize drawing to win a $25,000 private VIP day with Pallavi herself. Be sure to head on over to her bossbrainpodcast.com and pick up a free copy of Pallavi's gift and join us next time.